WNST Talent bus up to Belmont Park on the 9th of June to see Justify and Bob Baffert. I missed American Pharaoh back in 15 with my wife's illness, so maybe this year will be the year. If you have interest in a Belmont bus, make sure you toss me an email. This guy wrote an incredible piece of interest last week. He's one of my internet friends that I've gotten to know over the course of time and being back in the cockpit here and doing radio. He's a frequent visitor here. Every month or two we get together with Maury Brown of Forbes and of BizBall. Maury out on Twitter, a baseball aficionado, a business writer, and a sports business writer by trade at this point. And when the gambling baseball fever broke out, Maury, I knew I could count on you to try to set us all straight as to what it means, but I don't know that anyone has a real hold on this, and I know it's our first conversation. We could talk about how miserable the Orioles are on the field or the Mariners are in your part of the world, but boy, the tectonic plates and everything around sports changed last week with this Supreme Court decision, and there's a lot of money sitting on the floor, and the baseball owners are trying to figure this out, as well as all the other professional sports owners, right?
Yeah, they really are, Nestor. It's, normally the Supreme Court will do some of their more, important rulings at the end, and this is certainly one of them. But basically what they did is they knocked down a federal law that basically said that you couldn't have states have gambling in their respective states. Certainly we have it in Nevada. And that opens up the door for every state to allow this to occur. Now, many of them already had stuff in play, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, certainly New Jersey, where Chris Christie has been trying to do this for 7 years, but largely it didn't do anything in the immediate, right? I think that New Jersey said that they could probably have something going at the Monmouth racetrack in 2 weeks, and that was last week, so by Memorial Day. They think that they could possibly have something going. But the sports leagues are scrambling, Nestor, because largely every state could do this differently, and there's a bunch of concerns around each one of them. Some of them, I think a lot of fans will go and roll their eyes and go, you cannot be serious. You're going to talk about integrity of the game and all this stuff. But they're taking it really serious, and I think that this is something that is going to take a while to get sorted out. Largely, I hope, and I think that the leagues do as well, that Congress gets involved and tries to regulate this in some way, shape, or form, get it uniform and make it work for them. But, yeah, you said tectonic plates. I mean, the idea that and I can't even imagine that in a few years you will likely be able to watch a game and go to a kiosk and bet on that game.
It will feel like Pimlico did the other day. You walk up and say, I'll have Flacco for under 30 completions, or Lamar Jackson, or whoever it'll be, and you'll be doing it on your phone from your seat. And look, we'll talk about the NFL, and they'll be the first ones to get involved in this, and they want 1% of the VIG, which feels like 20% to the bookies and to the gamblers. I've done all the math on all of that, and I know Cuban and my pal Ted Leonsis have both issued statements saying that they may have doubled their businesses, and there's a lot of money on the floor there. But for all of us who go to a horse track, or even last week here with the Preakness here, and we're trying to do this bus trip up to Belmont for Justify, that when I talk to horse racing writers, Maury, and I've been doing this 27 years professionally, when I put a Dick Girardi or a Marty McGee on, they're not only talking about wagering and what they got, and it's out in the open, and Girardi got 40-1 on Justify back in February when he called me from Philadelphia, Marty McGee, and you go to the back and you bet. That the notion that when I had Kenny Mayne and Randy Moss on last week, who've worked for ESPN and the NFL Network, and I brought it up with them, they've never mentioned a point spread in their lives in 25 years of television because they weren't allowed to. And Al Michaels would get rained down on when he would talk about a field goal pushing a spread in an 11:55, 8:55 your time out on the West Coast, but. Where we came from Jimmy the Greek 30 years ago to where we are now, and in the NBA where we've had crooked referees in this generation, maybe throwing quarters, throwing games, and the notion that I can sit in my seat in 513 and place bets on my phone, it really is something that I haven't considered, having done this for 27 years and sometimes working around the edges of this. But look, Maury, I remember as an FCC license holder when Bet on Sports came along off the offshore in Costa Rica, the FCC sent me letters with my name on it saying, if you take their money, we're going to be watching. Like that really happened 15 years ago. And to think that this is all going to come out in the open and how this is going to affect the officials in the leagues, boy, oh boy. I mean, I don't know how this isn't going to be really, really messy in the end before it gets to my seat, right?
Well, yeah, and this is what I'm talking about regulating it. Look, for one thing, I mean, if you read what all the leagues and what, of course, the Players Association for all the major sports leagues have said, the players are going, look, you better not use our likenesses for anything, which, of course, we had with fantasy sports. And I think that they're largely about, hey, we want a cut of this. And in my mind, I go, that's actually really smart. Because if you go, look, guys, there's always the chance that you're going to go ahead and have somebody do something to throw games. Look, it happens now. Or we certainly have seen it in tennis.
Well, let me give you two words. Let me give you two words, Pete and Rose. How about those two words, right?
Well, and so Pete, the situation with Pete, of course, is, Pete was just stupid. Let's just be honest about it here. Pete actually, he didn't do very well at what he did because that's how he got his butt in so much trouble was that he owed, of course, his bookies so much money. But, the large problem with Pete was, and this is largely to baseball, right? You could catch some player doing that. I had all these questions like, well, does this mean that Pete Rose is now going to get reinstated because the leagues are going to allow this to happen? And I'm like, absolutely not. If anything, they're going to use Pete Rose and prop him up and say, if you guys do this stuff, now that it's out there in the open, this is what's going to happen to you. I think that they will make it even more painful if they catch people doing this stuff. And that's where, if you look at what the NBA and MLB did in West Virginia when there was, talk about legislation, they had deep concerns that there were not a lot of controls. They wanted to see background checks on all the operators. They wanted to see, that there was something in place to ensure that, players weren't walking up and placing bets. And then they said, look, we want a cut of this. And let's be honest, part of it is so that they can enrich themselves. But the other part of it was, if we're going to have to really build out our investigative units, we're going to have to be really looking to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen. And look, this is across leagues. This means, you mentioned it, the referees in the NBA, which we have a history of, but that'll be across all sports leagues and the front offices and the players. Yeah, it's a seismic shift. I don't know, Nestor, how this is going to go down. I don't know how long it'll be before we have some scandal. If we have a scandal, look, you could have a scandal right now, right? And maybe it's already happened. Certainly, like you said, we saw it in the NBA. But it's going to be an amazing shift. DraftKings and FanDuel already said that they're already ramped up, which I always thought it was kind of ironic that they said, we're not really gambling here with fantasy sports. And they're all ready and primed to go to make that sort of thing happen. You can get it online here as soon as, like they said, by the start of the NFL season, those two properties in DraftKings and FanDuel want to be ready to roll. I just don't think that the states are going to be there, or there will only be a handful of them. And I certainly begin to wonder, like I said, how this is going to play out. It'll be a mess if it's all 50 states doing something different. And look, not all of them are going to do it, but you just think about that. It's going to be a mess. I really hope that Congress gets involved for the sake of the leagues, for the sake of everybody, just to figure out what the lay of the land is.
Maury, by the way, Maury Brown is here, national baseball writer, and, of course, BizBall Maury out on Twitter, and sports business writer out at Forbes, and you can follow him. He's one of the great follows out there on the Twitter landscape at BizBall Maury out in Portland, Oregon. Maury, it's taken me a week to think this through a little bit, and obviously there's been a lot of hockey games and a race, and my wife's been ill, and I've been trying to do a little bit of rock and roll here and again with the Bodines over the weekend down at Rams Head and Annapolis and getting around. But the baseball part of this for me, and it's been a little while since I've been a party to this, and I'm not a gambler. I'm just not. I can't pretend to be. I've had plenty of gambling segments here, and Gamblers On, and Handicappers, and gambling addicts in my life, and in my business, and on my airwaves, and all of that stuff over the course of time. and it's just not my Jones, you know what I mean? Whether it's a $2 bet at the racetrack, which I did over the weekend, or not. But I'm just not a guy that's going to have action. But I would think baseball, maybe more because it's older and whiter and maybe lends itself to gambling and horse racing and sort of that nature. But baseball with as many games, as many innings, as many pitches, as many home run derbies and that sort of thing. Baseball might be, I don't want to say revived by this, but it may attract itself to a gambler maybe more so than football, which only happens 16 times a year and is by its very nature much more set up to be amateur hour because there's not as much of it. There's not as much action. Baseball could become a betting game because, let's be honest, I've gone to games and said, we need a little action in the section. Everybody puts a buck up, and first guy that hits a home run, everybody gets a name out of the hat or whatever. That there's more action involved in it if you had action on it than, let's say, some of the other sports. On a segment-by-segment basis, this could reinvigorate baseball in an interest level because there's more action available.
Well, I don't know if it's going to completely overtake the other sports, but I think that there's absolutely something to this idea of creating some additional interest. Look, there was a big reason that baseball hitched their wagon to DraftKings and FanDuel and the whole idea of fantasy baseball. I mean, it did allow for another level of interest. But look, Nestor, I mean, whether it's, the NCAA tournament, who, by the way, was the defendant in the Supreme Court case for this thing, they're not happy about any of this stuff. Whether it's, certainly March Madness or the Super Bowl or certainly the NFL, look, everybody's been talking for a long, long time that the reason that the ratings for the NFL are the way that they are is due to betting. And I just think that this just brings it further out into the open. And I think that'll be what you said amateur hour. And that's largely where the money's at, right? I mean, the person that does baseball is somebody that's like jonesing on it every day and is willing to sit there and make some critical, investments in baseball. And it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, fantasy baseball is not an easy thing. And trust me, I got history on this. I think I know the game pretty well. And I get my butt kicked in it every doggone time. That's why I don't play it anymore. But listen, it really is one of those things to where I think all the sports will see some increased interest. Now, whether it levels off at some point, the big thing to me is you mentioned it's your phone. It'll be easy to do. It'll be easy to do electronically. And I think that the weird thing will be that the thing that's always been on the periphery, which has been casinos that have in-stadium naming rights, those, certainly if we're looking in Arizona right now, the Diamondbacks are talking about moving to Scottsdale and building on reservation lands. Now that idea of hooking a casino up to a sports facility is real.
It's Gulfstream Park, right? It's Hollywood Park. It's Del Mar,
yep,
right? Literally.
I can see it like nobody's business. I can see it in less than 10 years. And so this idea, that's the thing that'll trip me out. You're going to be able to go when you go into whatever the bar is or whatever the heck at your game.
Imagine Yankee Stadium. Imagine Yankee Stadium as a betting parlor. Literally.
Yep.
Imagine it as a betting parlor. Imagine it as a little Las Vegas. Each one of these stadiums. Around here we were trying to figure out how to get slot machines into the racetracks here when West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware were kicking our ass. And then Delaware starts talking about parlay sports bets. And Atlantic City forever, the mobsters up there, led by the current president, trying to bring sports betting into their sleazy, little sand traps out, in Atlantic City. Now, it's all out in the open, right? Right from my seat in Section 513, same way they do it in Wimbledon, same way they did it over, they do it in the soccer palaces over there in Crystal Palace and whatnot. They'll just be doing it here, same as you do it in Vegas in a parlor. And I would see, much like we've gotten accustomed to guys beating the hell out of each other and bleeding all over each other on 12-foot screens above our chicken wings and our beer on a Thursday night at a sports bar, much as we've become accustomed to women beating the hell out of each other in the middle of a sports bar while I'm having a steak. America's gotten normalized with all of this. gambling and turning Yankee Stadium and Oriole Park at Camden Yards into a betting parlor. Hell, Angelos was trying to get Rosecroft 15 years ago to turn it into a betting parlor. So nobody's licking their lips on this more than Bob Kraft. It's just that Rogers now out in front of this earning his $40 million to try to figure out how every one of these owners can get themselves another $100 to $400 million a year in profit off of it.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, it'll be, the numbers are interesting. I mean, if you look at Vegas, how much gets bet, how many what the handle has been, and then how much profit they've made. I mean, it's hundreds of millions. But the thing, one thing that I'm thinking about as you're talking through this right now is that I don't think we're going to get to the point to where we can do prop bets. I mean, is Aaron Judge going to hit a home run, in this inning or something like that? Because then I think it really does set up the ability for an individual player to really do something that would, I think that they could easily throw that stuff, and they could be subjected to, altering game outcome or altering outcome, doing stuff that way. So I think that, once again, I think the big thing largely is, what is Congress going to do about this? And like I said, I think the leagues really want to see this happen. You mentioned one thing earlier, too, that was interesting.
And by the way, these are leagues that couldn't figure out how to get the right air pressure into footballs in Fox, literally, right? At the highest levels with everything on the line, they couldn't figure out how to get Tom Brady's jersey from being stolen after a Super Bowl. You're really asking a lot of integrity, especially at a time where, some guys are making $25 million to do this. Some guys hanging on the end of the roster, and a $50,000, beat or a bad beat wouldn't smell that bad to Tim Donaghy, who was out there officiating players making $20 million when he's making $300,000, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's all true. I mean, you would be stupid not to think about that stuff, especially the Donaghy stuff. I mean, I really begin to wonder about how this largely affects some of the refereeing and whatnot. But,
I saw Pulp Fiction. That's just pride effing with you.
Yeah. You mentioned like Kenny Mayne and these guys not being able to talk it on the air, and I begin to wonder whether Brent Musburger is smarter than everybody. I mean, he started doing this stuff where he went to Vegas and he's doing this thing, so he might be ahead of the curve on this stuff. But look, I mean, we've been having kind of this conversation around it on the fantasy side. People will pick up on this sort of thing. And it's just going to be weird because there's going to be this outcrop at some point where major outlets are going to have, just like we have fantasy now, they're going to have this stuff. And it's going to be strange. It's part of me just says it's kind of slimy.
Well, the hypersensitivity to injury reports now, right? I mean, Still, for the most part, the injury report, when John Harbaugh's thinking about it, all he's thinking about is, I don't want Mike Tomlin to know anything about my team. The same thing would be said for, hockey and upper body and lower body injuries. But, what does that mean when it's moving point spreads for real on NFL.com or on NHL.com? Boy, oh boy, I don't, we're at a different level when we're talking about stocks being regulated and banks being, literally that sort of regulation for insider trading and information. It's bad enough with horse racing, which has always been slimy, right? And I mentioned Pulp Fiction and, the mythical boxer throwing the match and all that. That's only been going on, from the beginning of time as well. Yeah, boy, there's a lot of room in here for slipperiness, shall we say, Maury Brown.
Yeah, and I think, I get back to kind of what I was saying earlier. If this hey, you guys are all going to get some extra bread here, sure, they can get lots more bread, if they go ahead and start throwing games. But I think that it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. And what will be the most interesting story is the story of what the reaction will be or what the penalties will be for the first player that they catch actually throwing a game. And that'll be the thing. And it'll depend on largely, I think, on the sport. But if it's, if it's baseball, oh my gosh, right? There'll be screams of 1919, Black Sox scandal.
Well, think of the lengths they went to for 15 years to hide and dope and illicitly get drugs and Balcos and Dominican Republics and sleazy doctors and scumbags in the Mets clubhouse and FedEx, and Jason Grimsley climbing through. I mean, when you think about sandpaper in Joe Nigro's pocket, and you think about knuckleballs and Vagisil and Gaylord Perry, and and just how much cheating, literally, and the Saints trying to break guys' legs and putting bounties on Quay, all the sleaze we've seen in sports. Now you're going to bring enormous amounts of money being wagered. It really is, it's an integrity mess. I mean, the whole thing's been an integrity mess to begin with when you got the FBI and NCAA. And, at every turn, there's always been somebody willing to cheat. Boy, now you've opened up, Pandora's box, I think.
Well, it's the money, Nestor. I mean, that's the heart of all that stuff that you mentioned. But look, I can't, the leagues are in a difficult spot here, right? I mean, sure, there's the money that comes along with it. I don't know if it's as grandiose as some might make it out to be. But largely what's happened here is that a state or multiple states and individuals challenged this idea that states could not basically have regulated betting on sports in their states. And the Supreme Court found that unconstitutional. Now you've basically got the tail wagging the dog in the sense that the leagues have to react to this. They're like, all right, if you guys are going to do this thing, holy crap, we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And I think that it's, once again, I mean, it's a major thing. If you read through some of my articles about this, and look, I'm far from the expert on this stuff, but what little bit that I've gotten from legal counsel from MLB and talking to others around other sports leagues around this sort of thing, they've looked to places like Australia where they've got this. This is where this 1% of basically kind of the net total that comes in, right? And really how that equates to 20% if you talk to others that are the bookies and whatnot. But look, they're like, look, we got to try and figure out how to regulate this thing and put a bunch of controls in place before you guys go taking off. I don't think that the leagues are prepared for this at all. And once again, I think that we're going to figure this out in about, I'm looking at my wristwatch right now, in about 2 weeks. New Jersey's going to go, boom, we're open for business, and it'll really come into play. I don't think that you're going to see much in the way of basketball, although you could, right? But certainly by the time the NFL season rolls around, which is where the big money is, you're going to see this in action. And I just, like I said, it's going to be, how are they going to do it? How are these states going to do it? Are we going to get Congress involved? How are the leagues responding to it? What does it mean overall? And I don't think, much like we started this segment, I don't think anybody can really tell you how that's going to look, other than the fact that it's a significant shift in the landscape.
And there's going to be a lot of money to fight over. And as you're writing about this week with Major League Baseball and collusion, and look, the Orioles are out in Chicago this week trying to figure out who sucks more or less, or, the Machado thing and the sweepstakes to the Cubs. That's where, but, they're fighting over the money again, and the Adam Joneses and the Moustakas aren't getting it anymore. There's, good reason to believe the Machados and the Bryce Harpers will be getting it, right? And the Aaron Judges and whomever is coming down the line. But they're fighting over money. The stadiums are empty. We're in the most depressed of depressed markets here, where the team stinks, the ownership stinks, nobody's going to the games. There's no chance of them winning. There's no hope. There's no sort of strategy or good feeling amongst the populace or the fan base here. But baseball unto itself just has a lot of challenges as to, there's a lot of money here and a whole bunch more coming down this gambling line. Who's getting what percentage of it, right?
Yeah, and this will be interesting to see. So Dan Halem, who's the head of labor for Major League Baseball, was talking at a symposium over the weekend, and he said 56% of revenues go to the players. And this is largely what he's said to me and he said to others, right? Now, what does that mean, right? What are the revenues and what are the costs? Well, he said, he goes, 56% of our revenues go to our players. Well, our players are the Major League Baseball players and the minor league players and their benefits and their bonuses. So it's a larger sum. If you look at the opening day payrolls, you go, holy crap, I'm hearing they're making a lot more money than this. Well, then you're not factoring everything in. What people should look at for this stuff is at the end of the year, there's what they call the end of year payrolls that come out, and they come out largely in the week before Christmas, before the holiday, and it's the final payrolls for all the teams that they use for the luxury tax purposes, and they're wildly larger, Nestor, than the ones that you see on opening day because they roll in a bunch of benefits and other things into it. So you take that, you take the minor league stuff. Now, I'm waiting to hear, when I talked prior to Halen, he said that in April there was supposed to be a bump in pay, a cost of living increase for minor leaguers to get, right? No, it's not as much as we'd like to probably see if we're talking about equitable pay, but they were supposed to be that. And remember, for the minor leaguers, even though they're not getting paid squat, and I find, that really kind of appalling on one level, the league pays for those, and when I say the league, Major League Baseball pays for those salaries. The minor league clubs don't pay for them. The operators of those minor league teams don't. And they don't get, of course, the owners don't get a return on those players in the minors until they come up to the majors. So there's that. Now, on the revenue side, it's only baseball-related revenue. And that means, of course, television and radio, your attendance and the stuff that you see, of course, when you go to the game and you see, merchandise sold and all that other stuff. But what it doesn't count is that part of what Major League Baseball has been really good at is this digital thing, right? They spun off and they created MLB Advanced Media. And they were so good at this thing, Nestor, that HBO and WWE and PGA Live and ESPN and others came calling and said, can you guys do what you do for baseball for us? And they were so good at it, they said, yeah, we're going to spin off something. We'll start a new company. It'll be completely separate from baseball. And we'll call it BAMTech. And they sold that to Disney for a freaking penny, pretty penny. And they still own, I believe, 15% of it. They still have an equity stake in it that they're pulling in. Now, the players will go, yeah, okay, we get this idea that you guys own that and there's no baseball being played on that stuff. But if it wasn't for what we did in terms of MLB Advanced Media, you guys wouldn't have the revenues to spin that thing off. And this has created, of course, a bunch of acrimony. And you've got the players, of course, upset right now. We have a brand new executive director in Tony Clark on his first CBA that did not go well for the players. And I think that there's, a situation where the players are looking at it right now in this past off season and what's going on right now during the, early part of the season. Owners take a long view of this thing. They really do look at it and go, look, if we get under the luxury tax next year, and I'm speaking about the Dodgers and the Yankees, well, we're going to reset our tax rate from 50% plus a bunch of surcharges and getting dinged at it down to 20%, and then we can go wild again. You watch, Nestor. I've been writing about this for a while. Next year, or this upcoming off season, is going to be nuts. I mean, Harper, there's a bunch of guys out there that are going to get solid pay, and we're going to see this thing turn around. Now, whether this will be something that is remembered in 2021 when this labor deal goes, and expires, I think it's possible. For the first time in, I can't remember, since 2002, when we almost had a strike and lockout, I think we've got a real chance for it in 2021. It'll be really interesting to watch.
Well, and, these fights come up every, it seems like 2 cycles. Back in the 70s and 80s, it felt like it was about every 24 months. I spent the first 15 years on the radio, always in a squabble. It's been a little while since they've had a cat fight, and certainly there's plenty of money to fight over, right?
Yeah, and look, this is the story that I'm about ready to write about. This is like the most crazy thing for anybody that's been following in baseball for any period of time. Right now, Nestor, I don't think the owners would take a cap if the players said that they wanted one. And when I say a cap, I'm talking about one similar to what we have in the NFL, which is tied to baseball-related revenues. Now the owners are on the flip side of things. In the 90s and in the 80s, the players were making more than the owners were pulling in. Well, now the owners are pulling in this money, where it used to be the union going, look, nobody's putting a gun to your head telling you you have to pay these guys this much. Well, now there's no gun pointed at anybody's head that says they have to pay it all. And so it's going to create this really interesting dynamic. I think with the exception of maybe Jerry Reinsdorf, who owns the White Sox and was leading the charge along with Bud Selig to get a salary cap in when we had the strike in '94, I think with him maybe the exception, no owner right now would seriously consider a salary cap tied to baseball-related revenues because there's so much money flowing into the game. So, look, Halem's going to say 56% is still going to the players. Okay, sure. I mean, the players have the right to look at the books, and so I'm going to assume that Dan isn't lying. But still, I mean...
Well, the amazing part is the stadiums are empty. Yeah, the stadiums are empty, and it feels like they're not making money. They're making so much money that's invisible, right, to what the stadium experience looks like, and we're about to add gambling on top of that. It's invisible to the fans. It's not invisible to those inside like you who do the business work on this. And it's certainly not invisible or lost on the union or the agents as to where the money is coming from and what they're in on or they're not in on at this point. But, the owners can cry poor all they want, and certainly the one here will. There's just been so much money falling off the side of buses, and the players want to go get theirs, and they don't have a Marvin Miller to go get it right now, right?
No, there's no mechanism, Nestor. I mean, that's the thing. In the NFL or in the NBA, that was what the deal was in the NBA. Remember, I don't know if you remember, they wanted to do this thing where they were going to smooth, what they called smoothing, when the new labor deal hit, because they doubled their TV revenues. And the players said, forget that noise, just give us this big hike. And you suddenly saw these crazy large deals being offered because the money was available. And everybody was like, well, it's not worth it. Well, no. The market changed. I mean, that's the thing.
Billick's son-in-law took advantage of that, when he signed with the Pistons, John Lure. I mean, he got twice the amount of money they thought they were going to get in that offseason, and this baseball offseason was the exact opposite of that, right? And
yeah. Well, and I will say this, I don't think that, I think Halem was talking largely, I think that he is largely talking historically about that percentage and what's going on. But look, man, I mean, the weather has been crappy, and there are some bellwether teams, namely like the Dodgers and a couple of others, that are just not doing well in terms of attendance. Now, some of this is done on purpose. So when you look at some of the attendance numbers, specifically for the Blue Jays and for the Marlins, they were counting. There's nothing in the league that says that you can't count comps as part of your attendance. But it's bad in the sense that it totally jacks up your revenue sharing. I mean, they come to the end of the year and they go, all right, you guys sold this many tickets, that means you have this much revenue. And they go, yeah, except for about 20% of that or whatever it is.
We sold those tickets for $1, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. Well, selling them for $1 was at least revenue. But, I mean, you're starting to see this. So, or flooding the secondary market. I mean, that was when you saw ticket brokers purchasing up large chunks of this thing. And then, nobody's in the seats. But, yeah, I mean, all of it aside, I mean, the weather's been the weather's historic. I mean, since they've been keeping track of rainouts, it's the wettest start to a season they've had, and so I mean, you take all of those things into account, and it's going to be a down year in terms of attendance. But I mean, like you said, they seem to find money. I mean, I follow the sponsorship space, and they're signing new sponsors every single year at the league level and at the club level. And so new money is pouring in places that they haven't had it before. Look, is this to say that, they could play baseball games with nobody in the stands? Of course not. I mean, they need that, the parking revenue, everything that goes along with it. But still, I mean, they're making a lot of money. I think that the capacity is there, Nestor, for this to potentially come down a bit this year. And I'll be interested to see how that is. Because if they go 56% is going to the players, and the players go, yeah, but it was 3% down on opening day, which it was, and you go, well, that's because our revenues were down this year, guys. So there's your 56%. And this is where like I said, it would be amazing. The players, I think, right now, and I haven't heard anything from the players, one player rep, certainly not from Tony Clark, but this idea that if the owner said, look, guys, you go ahead, much like the NFL, and we're going to tie everything to baseball-related revenues. And if we do well, you guys are going to get a bunch of money. And if we have a down year, you're not going to get so much. And and that makes them partners, right? Well, it gets crazy that way. But it's still, for the longest time, You know, I mean, going all the way back to Jim Hunter, the day that Charlie Finley didn't pay Jim Hunter's annuities when he got released, and suddenly the Yankees were dogpiling and everybody was flying in to talk to him and gave him this massive contract. People have realized that on the free agency market that the players had a huge leg up and you get big money. Well, now the owners have figured out a way to get this money outside of the game as part of the game, and there are no controls for it to filter back to the players at the rate that it had been. So, that's going to be something about. That's the story that I'm going to write about. I think it's a large, it's a crazy story that actually has true merit. I'm really hearing that the owners would not accept the salary cap right now, which is crazy given what happened with baseball in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the radio during all of that. I began in 91 and the strike in 94, 95, and what it accomplished and did. And then in 02 when Peter and Andy McPhail had their love affair that, begat the current modern era of Orioles baseball here and averted the strike and the work stoppage back then. I think it all through, and I think about what they've accomplished and what they haven't accomplished. It's still a have-not situation. It's still the one league that 20 years ago really would have benefited. Baseball would be more interesting, more fascinating, more fair, more across the board if they had a salary cap. It would be a better game for everyone. And, of course, Bud Selig and Manfred would make the argument of how many teams have been in the postseason and that it hasn't been a Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox world, but we're about to go back into that world again. And there's only so much of you go into a fight, one team has a $300 million payroll, the other one has a $45 million payroll, that really does stand to define the story of the Orioles and the Pirates and the Royals and the Rays and the Padres over the long scope of it, over the long ride. The bad places and the places with no revenue and no fans have really been penalized by the lack of balance of revenue throughout the game, and it's only worse. It's not better. The Yankees and the Cubs and the Red Sox and the Dodgers have gone a whole new stratosphere, and when gambling's involved, than where the lowly Tampa Rays are. And, maybe they'll wind up in Portland, Maury, maybe, right?
Well, I mean, that's a story for another day. I think that it's expansion if it ever happens here at all. But, look, I will say this. Everybody that, is sitting there in Houston right now going, yeah, Nestor, except for did you look at what we did? And that's the other story that's going on. There's always your Yankees and Dodgers and Red Sox, right? But what you saw or what you've seen, and granted, Chicago had more resources or has more resources now than they did, you're starting to see this mindset where it's like, you know what? If we we'll suck for a while, but if we pull in a bunch of good draft picks, we can be really good. And that idea actually, that's what the players are upset about. Because, look, everybody thinks they can do that, right? The owners, I hate to say this, they're not the brightest group, because what they do is they go, what did those guys do to win the World Series? We need to do that. Oh, that Moneyball thing, we need to do that. I don't understand what it is, but we need to do that. Oh, okay, so let's tank and get a bunch of draft picks, and we'll do that. And work for the Cubs and work for the Astros. No, what it did is it worked for two very smart front offices. And that's the thing that everybody, unless they're following the game, doesn't get. No Jeff Luhnow, no Theo Epstein, no smart front office people. None of that happens. Because what you get is you get the Pirates. You get the Orioles. You get teams that suck and stay sucky for a long time. And so, I don't like this idea of let's all be like crowd speak. I mean, this idea of collusion. It's not collusion. It's this idea that they go, what did those guys do to win? We need to do that. That's not collusion. That's just not forward thinking, or that's not creative thinking.
Well, I mean, the creative thinking for Mr. Angelos is, I have all this money over here. Why am I going to give it to this baseball player to come in to help me get to 82 wins? I'd rather go cheap, think cheap, talk cheap. I mean, that's what McPhail did when he came in here. He said, go cheap. When McPhail leaves and they're stuck with Chris Davis at $130 million, and, Duke can't hit 180 in the big leagues, and they have to figure this out over the next 10 years because they didn't go cheap. So they get punished when they don't go cheap a lot. lot of times. So, and I think you get conditioned into that. Hey, we can go cheap and maybe we win like Houston did, and if we don't, at least we're not stuck with Chris Davis. At least we made more money.
But Nestor, this really is it's endemic to all sports leagues. Look, first of all, winning championships is not easy. You know this. I mean, if we're talking about this stuff, right? But I mean, if you think about it really honestly, it's not an easy thing to do. You would expect that those people that are making a lot of money to make those decisions at the major league levels would be smart enough to do it every once in a while. But look at Cleveland, or if you want to go ahead and look at hockey, you can go ahead and look at some of the, the Sun Belt states and some of those franchises. You can look at any sports league and you're going to find a club that has been crappy for a long time. And in the NBA, the problem is that players, and the ones that are important, that can really shift the needle, the LeBron Jameses of the world, they can go into any market and they can create a winner. And if they don't want to go to Milwaukee, or if they don't want to go to Sacramento, or if they don't want to go to Portland, then you have disparity that way. In MLB, it's largely about, because it's such a team-oriented thing, it's getting your talent to all line up equally and being able to sustain it for, a period of time, and that's not easy. In Cleveland, the Browns are the Browns. I swear, if we look at this latest experiment in terms of what we're doing at the quarterback position on what happens, I mean, look at that. I mean, they haven't had a decent quarterback since Bernie Kosar, and even then, right? So it is one of those things to where there is always this, and there's, of course, a much better equitable system in the NFL and the NBA, and yet there is still disparity. MLB does have the best parity in terms of the teams that make it. The difficulty is teams that make it can come back even in losing trends, right? The Dodgers stink right now. The Dodgers can get really good really fast because they have the resources to pick up multiple pieces. Where in the NBA, if you can go out and you can get one really good free agent, that can be your difference maker. And so it's largely a component of the games themselves and how they're played and the economics behind it. So,
well, part of it is the Yankees have won, 50 titles, and it took the Cubs 100 years, and it took the Red Sox 80 years, and I'm now working on about 35 here, right? This thing here is its own animal, and has been run into the ground, quite frankly. But on a case-by-case basis, nobody's tried harder than the Tigers. They just haven't done it. You know what I mean?
No.
Nobody's tried harder than the Mariners. They just haven't done it. Amidst all the Ken Griffey's and the Randy Johnsons and the players they've had, and the A-Rods, they've had all that, right? And still haven't won.
Yeah, I'm sitting, that's the team that I cover the most, right?
Sure.
Because I'm here in the Pacific Northwest, and so it is difficult year after year watching them not make the playoffs. It really is, because their payroll hangs around 110, 115 million. It's not like they're not spending; they just haven't figured out how to do it right, and that's largely the problem for some of these other teams. The ones that bug me are the ones that go, "Hey, let's just hang around with, an $80 million payroll forever." No, the Pirates, their TV deal isn't great. The Rays isn't. The Marlins aren't. The Marlins are going to be the ones that I'm most interested in watching. I mean, really are. I do want to see if I understand what's going on in year one. I can understand that in maybe year two or even year three. But if Jeets treats the Marlins the same way that Jeff Loria did, oh boy, then they might as well just close up shop. But I don't think that they will. I really don't. I think that they are doing what they need to do right now. And granted, there's been some, gaffes along the way already, but I think largely the idea that they have is smart. But once again, it'll be like the Astros. Can you weather that many bad seasons before they get good? And we're going to have to wait and see.
Dude, man, I wanted to talk rock and roll with you. We're out of hand with the time. You and I just get going, man. We're like old guys sitting around talking about new things. I dig that. My BizBall Maury is my friend, Maury Brown. He's out in Portland, Oregon. He writes for Forbes. He does it well. If you need something in the baseball and the side of business, go check him out at Forbes and at BizBall Maury. Class dismissed, Professor. We'll check in again with you soon. And when we do, the Orioles will still be in 5th place. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, but the next time we talk, I'll have a bunch of summer shows underneath my belt. I'm getting ready for that, so I'll send pictures.
Yeah, let me know where Manny Machado is going to be playing, too. We'll make a bet on it.
Okay, you got it, man.
See you later, Maury. He plays in the rock and roll band Shoot the Thrill out there in the Pacific Northwest as well. You can find them on Instagram and Twitter as well. Shoot to Thrill, my favorite AC/DC song. Imagine that. Maury's in an AC/DC cover band playing the role of Malcolm Young. Didn't have the leg kick going like Angus. So I don't know who does that role, but I have seen the videos. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. It is crystal clear, no static at all, like our friends at Steely Dan who are coming in to play the Model Lyric during my 50th birthday week on October 11th. You can learn about our partners at Model Lyric at model-lyric.com. Don't forget the fantastic. Look at this. The Baltimore Brigade. I got my hat out as well. They're taking on the Philadelphia Soul on Friday night. Ron Jaworski is going to join us later on in the week to talk about the Brigade. You can learn more at Monumental Sports, where you can download the app and watch the games and watch Randy Hipper throw the ball around against the Philadelphia Soul on Friday night. Or get down to the Royal Farms Arena. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I had a little three-piece box on Sunday. My wife came back from lunch and brought me back Royal Farms, and I was like, that's awesome. Royal Farms, we gas up there. We use the app. We get the points. And I'm this close to getting a free Western fry and a three-piece and a roll. Royal Farms, Rofo, real fresh, real fast, and the Kona blend in your morning cup. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.